Welcome to another Wartales video. So this video is going to be another class overview. Today I'm going to be going over the Swordsman and the Brute. I'm going to try to make this one a little bit shorter. The last one ended up being slightly longer than I was aiming for, so I'll try to keep it to a little bit under 10 minutes per character, but we'll see how we go. Okay, so kicking off with the Swordsman. The Swordsman is a strength-based character. They are one of the best two tanks in the game, and so strength and constitution are the two kind of main stats that these guys end up playing around with. They're a character that can equip medium and heavy armor at level 3, depending on which path you take. So this character I've obviously got to level 3 and chosen the knight path so he can equip heavy armor there. And with heavy armor and the shield, they can get their guard up quite high, which is very nice for the survivability side of things. For knights, they've got a couple of different skill points that are available. So similar to the archer and the spearman, at level 2 you have defensive stance, which gives you deflection and gains a valor point if you're engaged, and valorous support. So ending your turn near an ally gives you a bonus valor point as well. So those first two skills you've seen in Archer and Spearman, I actually think on tanks, taking the deflection skill or defensive stance is probably more valuable just in terms of being able to try to keep them alive that little bit longer and allow them to take some of the more dangerous enemies on a little bit more safely. So if you know they're going to take a big hit, pop that defensive stance and you're much more likely to survive the round. It does only reduce one attack, so you do need to time when this character takes a turn. Their third one, which is a skill we haven't seen yet, is Valorous Duel, which gives you a valor point when you engage an enemy. So this is quite good on a character who you're going to be charging around and starting a lot of fights with, or who you're putting on the front line to get engaged with a lot. Again, I think with Valorous Duel, it's sort of more or less limited to 1 point per round, which is not too bad, so it puts it on about par with Valorous Support if you're quite active and taking out a lot of enemies in a turn. But I prefer the defensive stance personally, only because reducing that damage by 70% can be really useful on some of the fights, particularly against champions. You don't want to have it on too many people though. And against champions, this skill does lose some value because you're never able to engage them, so you don't actually get valor points from it. Alrighty, moving on to the level 3 skills. So Protector. Now this does allow the knight to get heavy armor. So when you choose Protector, you do get heavy armor similar to knight, and Swordmaster, you only get medium armor. So the Swordmaster is the kind of path you play if you're going for a more damage dealing swordsman rather than a protecting swordsman or a tank swordsman. In the Protector path you get Encouragement, which provides all allies in the radius of 30% damage reduction. Quite nice. The radius is a fairly nice size, can often be popped on the very first turn of combat to make sure that first turn you're not taking too much extra damage, or obviously you group up around him and you can pop it as well. So you can quite often get your whole party in that damage reduction. Lasting 2 rounds is quite useful. It's long enough that you'll negate sort of a chunk of the enemy damage. Protection does stack with deflection as well, so you end up reducing the next attack by a significant amount of damage. I'm not too sure whether it's an intended effect at the moment, but I'm pretty sure if you have both of them active, you only take 1 damage from the next attack, so it might actually be closer to that 100%. Need to do a little bit more testing there. The Knight skill, Destabilizing Strike. So this basically gives you another attack. So if you have a look at his skills, his Slice does 11 to 14 and his Destabilizing Strike does 11 to 14. So in essence, it's another free attack. But this one also causes a destabilization. So as the tank, he's going to be quite often engaged with enemies that have quite a lot of armor, who might be living a little bit longer. Taking out their armor before you do any damage is fantastic, and it can kill them, can get the enemies down in health a fair bit quicker. It allows other allies to do more damage as well. The other thing that I really like about destabilizing strike is that you don't have to be engaged with an enemy to use it. A number of the other skills that cause destabilization do require you to be engaged with them, and that's not possible on some enemies. Final skill at level 3 is the Swordmaster, and the skill there is Laceration, which deals 18 damage twice. And obviously these numbers change depending on your strength. When you do pick Swordmaster, you actually get a little strength bonus, so it increases the damage that Laceration will do straight off the bat. You do, however, need to perform a couple of attacks prior to Laceration. So you actually need to plan when you're going to use this skill significantly more than something like the Archer's Barrage. It doesn't cover a huge area. It's a fairly small kind of cone attack, but you can get up to 3 units in it if they're positioned correctly. So hitting 3 units twice for that much damage is pretty significant, and you'll normally pick up a kill or 2 from it. So it can be quite useful. It's a little bit of a pity that the Swordsman doesn't have the ability to gain Valor points on kill, so they don't have that level 2 skill that the Spearman and Archer do, because combined with Swordmaster again, I think you'd end up getting a little bit more value from it as well. Alrighty, jumping into their level 5 skills, Bulwark. So every time they engage, they gain deflection. Again, if you've already taken deflection and defensive stance up here, it's probably less required that you take this. So deflection doesn't stack. If you get deflection from Bulwark and then you cast the deflection skill, nothing changes. You don't get 2 stacks of it. You don't get 70% plus 70% damage reduction. So it's really, this one doesn't synergize super well with taking the defensive stance at the start there. Their second skill, counterattack. Each time they engage, they gain riposte. This is actually a really handy skill. It works quite well if you are planning on engaging a lot. So every time you engage, you gain a Valor point. You also gain a free attack from it. And that free attack will count towards things like the Laceration attacks as well. So quite a useful one. You do want to plan where the Swordsman is going in the turn order to make sure that you're getting the maximum value out of this. So you don't want him to engage, have that enemy get killed, and then get him to have to re-engage or anything like that. So normally you try to run in, engage someone, and then have that enemy take a turn to get that riposte off more consistently. And the third and final skill for their level 5 is Daring. So as long as a bonus is active on this unit, their attacks apply weakening for a round, which reduces the enemy damage by 50%. So again, this is a really nice one to have on a tank, because what it'll mean is that you can do something like pop defensive stance, which gives you deflection, which means that you have a bonus active, and so when you attack, you apply weakening to the enemy. So not only are you shielding yourself and taking reduced damage, you're causing the enemy to deal reduced damage as well. It really allows the Swordsman to survive quite a long time in combat and take some of those high damage targets out of the equation, leaving your damage dealing units free to roam and deal damage as they want. It does work quite well with Swordmaster's Laceration as well, because this will hit multiple enemies. So let's say you took deflection, popped it, got your bonus, attacked people with Swordmaster, you've applied weakening to a bunch of enemies if you haven't killed them killed them outright, that is. So they're a really good class. They do live for quite some time, and having a high constitution and a lot of guard, a lot of armor does mean that they really can take the damage and do well with it. All right, moving on to the Brute. So the Brute is, again, strength-based character, very similar to the Swordsman. So like the Swordsman, they can equip a one-handed weapon with a shield or an offhand, or a two-handed weapon as well to deal more AoE damage. Again, strength and constitution are really the two kind of areas or stats that these guys are going to be looking for, and they will also come with the one kind of first skill, Now, Annihilation is not your starting skill. Obviously, when you change your weapon, you can see Annihilation capacity on that. That's actually what determines what your first weapon skill is. So the brutes have a couple of different one-handed weapon options, and they have some pretty powerful ones available by the end of the game. So I'd highly recommend taking at least one brute in your party. Brutes are one of the classes that I would actually generally recommend you have two of as well. They just scale quite well, they survive quite well, and they can deal quite a lot of damage as well. Wrath, the skill that I have on this guy here, is actually one of the newest skills in the game. So it replaced a skill called Fury, which was a 2-cost skill that gave you a 50% damage increase. Now, Wrath kills an enemy outright if they have fewer than 20% hit points remaining and no guard, and then gives the unit Fury. So this is really good. It basically gives the brute a free attack. It would also be a really great skill to have on a swordsman to start trying to proc that laceration a little bit quicker as well. We'll jump into the brute skills. So the brute's level 2 talents are exactly the same as the swordsman's talents. So you can see why I'm doing these classes together, because it just makes sense talking about them one straight after the other. So no changes there. Again, I think deflection's quite a strong one on the brute, particularly if you're looking to have him be engaged in combat a lot and taking a couple of hits. Having it on this character in particular, I think, saved him from dying in probably 3 to 5 of the fights this game so far. You can see he's actually got a title, The Scarred. So this is a title that your character gets when they have been injured many, many times in the same fight. Receiving this title actually gives you a bonus attribute or stat point that you can assign in exactly the same way as when you level up. So getting titles on these characters is actually a really useful way to get them some extra attribute points. So this guy got the Survivor because he had been taken down to 0 hit points more than a certain number of times in the game so far. So you do get kind of these really cool little mini rewards during combat as well for achieving particular things. I don't think I've unlocked them all yet, and characters can get multiple titles as well, though only the latest one shows up for them. All right, back into the brute skills. So when a brute becomes a vanguard, they can only wear medium armor. Both Smasher and Destroyer have heavy armor assigned to them, and this is kind of the damage dealing version of the swordsman. Obviously for the brute class though. The vanguard skill, Relentless Charge, allows the brute to disengage, charge in a straight line, deal a little bit of damage, and apply slowdown. Now, I'm still trying to decide how much I like this skill. Having disengage options on a character is fantastic, and the reason that I've gone for this particular character is if there's a character with less than 20% health, I really want him to be able to get there and actually do something about it. There'd be nothing worse than having this character engaged in combat, someone on low health that I really want to take out, and particularly for, what in essence is a free action point. So I've taken this one for him to charge out, kill the character, run back in possibly, and deal an extra 50% damage using the Fury that he gets from Wrath. So it's a fun little combo so far, but it's a little bit different to how I've normally played the brute, because with only the medium armor, they're not quite as tanky. They can't take anywhere near the same amount of damage. Smasher, the level 3 skill, is Poisoned Impact. It's a 2-cost AoE attack. This is one that I haven't really tried out much yet at all. The AoE attacks I do find a little bit awkward sometimes to use when you're trying to group your party up through using something like Valorous Support, the level 2 talent, because you might hit your own people and you really don't want to apply poison to yourself. You are already going to take enough damage in many of the fights. However, if you had a character in heavy armor who was just going to run out in front and cause a little bit of mayhem, this is probably the guy and the skill that you're looking for. Dealing poison damage is obviously good to units. However, it does mean that you're not going to proc anything from an on-kill effect. So you actually need to deal direct damage to the enemy to obtain those Valor points. Not that the Brute has the ability to get points back from kills, but just worth keeping in mind. Okay, the Destroyer talent. This is actually my favourite one for the Brute. Weakening Blow. Deals some guaranteed damage and causes weakness for 3 rounds on an opponent. That 50% damage reduction on some of the champions is absolutely fantastic, and even on a kind of fight-by-fight basis, Weakening Blow is super powerful. Again, you can combine that Weakening Blow with Defensive Stance. You engage them with Weakening Blow and spend a Valor point. You then cast Defensive Stance and gain a Valor point, so you're still at kind of zero gain anyway. And then you're free to use your normal attack or do whatever you wish from there. Having another way to attack an enemy each turn is really useful too, because you can then potentially kill a couple of enemies per turn too. The level 5 talents for the Brute. So this one has a slight bug at the moment where it lists Brutality and Inspiration on the right hand side. You don't get those for picking this talent straight off the bat, but you do deal 25% increased damage to armor. Again, really useful because the Brute's going to usually be in that kind of front of combat, one of the first people to engage, usually when the enemy has armor. Getting rid of that armor earlier is very, very useful. If you're combining the Brute with the Swordsmaster with something like the Destabilizing Strike, it may lose a little bit of value, but overall being able to get through armor quicker is a good thing. When the skill is upgraded, if you break somebody's armor, you actually do get that Inspiration and Brutality, which is really, really nice and can help him move from, like, he can run a full 10, 12 movement, kill someone or break their armor, kill someone, and then if you disengaged, you'd then be able to move 10 to 12 again and do another action. So you've actually got potentially a lot of movement when you combine those skills properly. The next skill, Opportunism. As long as there are at least 2 enemies within 6 meters, they gain protection. If you're going down the tank route with this guy, it's extra damage reduction for absolutely no effort. There will almost always be 2 enemies around you. So this is a skill that is active very, very frequently and is a really, really useful one for keeping him alive. And their final skill, Cruelty. Damage and critical hit are increased by 20% against units with at least 1 debuff. So this is an absolutely fantastic one for the Brute. Obviously, his first skill applies slowdown, second skill applies poison, and third skill applies weakening. So all 3 of the Brute talents synergize well with Cruelty, though obviously this is a much more damage-heavy talent, and so taking this is really, really what you'd go for if you're going for that really high damage kind of Brute. I am going to try to go down that path on this run with this character, and yeah, really go for that all-out damage and see how it goes. It'll be interesting to see. Okay, so that's a quick overview of the Swordsman and Brute classes. They are 2 of my favourite classes in the game. Look, I actually quite like all the classes, I'll be honest, but having at least 1 Swordsman and 1 Brute in the party give you a whole lot of sustainability, quite a lot of damage, and they both scale really well at level 5 to supporting the party, staying alive, and actually being able to kill things as well. The final thought that I hadn't mentioned yet was with the Knight, if you actually equip an offhand weapon, so a throwing axe or a grappling hook, one of the other offhand weapons, you can use the attacks from those to proc things like the laceration. On this guy, you can use that to proc things like the laceration as well. So having an offhand weapon equipped on Swordsman gets you a little bit of extra value even on top of that, on top of what the Brute gets. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in Wartales soon.